There's a millennial individual sitting on a beach on a Saturday afternoon in August, and they cannot relax. The sun is doing what it is supposed to do. The water is the right color. They chose this deliberately, specifically after months of saying they needed a break. They saved for it. They planned it. They are here. And the dominant internal experience of being here is something closer to supervised restlessness than to rest, a persistent low-level activation that will not fully release. Regardless of how many days the vacation lasts, that has in fact been present for so long that the millennial individual is no longer entirely sure what its absence would feel like. The phone is in the bag. That was a choice. The bag is 2 feet away. The phone is in it. The millennial individual is aware of this with a frequency that does not correspond to any reasonable definition of relaxation. This is not an anxiety disorder. Exactly, and it is not a character flaw. It is a nervous system that was trained, during the years when nervous systems are most malleable, to stay on. And it has not received a sufficiently clear and sustained signal that it is safe to turn off. It may not know what that signal would feel like. It has not received it in long enough that the off switch has become, in a practical sense, unavailable. The training began earlier than the millennial individual usually traces it, and it was not dramatic in any single moment. It was the accumulation of a particular kind of childhood experience that is common enough in the millennial individual's generation to constitute a pattern. Rather than an exception, the millennial individual grew up in a household where the adults were stretched, not necessarily neglectful, not necessarily unhappy, but stretched by the economic conditions of the late 1970s and 1980s, by the restructuring of family life that the rising divorce rate and the rising dual-income household had produced, by the specific emotional and practical demands of adult life in a period when the infrastructure for those demands was thin. The adults were managing things, and children who grow up in households where the adults are managing things learn something about what is expected of them in that environment. Don't they learn to be fine? They learn to be easy. They learn to manage their own states, rather than importing them into an already stretched adult world. They learn that the adults have enough and that adding to the enough is a thing that good children do not do. And in learning this, they develop a specific set of skills. The ability to self-regulate, to self-entertain, to read the room and respond to what it needs rather than to what they need. That will serve them in some ways for the rest of their lives and cost them in others. What they do not develop, because the conditions of their childhood did not require it and in fact actively discouraged it, is the capacity for genuine unstructured rest. Rest was not modeled. Stillness was not encouraged. The message, delivered through the structure of the household rather than through any explicit instruction, was that the productive, the useful, the capable were the valued. The child who was doing something was contributing. The child who was simply being was using up space. This is the specific origin of the beach problem. The millennial individual on the beach is not lazy. They are not ungrateful for the vacation they saved for. They are running the program that was installed when programs get installed during childhood, through repetition, in the context of what the environment required, and the program does not contain a subroutine for sitting on a beach doing nothing for 4 days. The subroutine was never written. The gap in the code is not a bug. It is an absence. The hypervigilance that developed as a functional adaptation to the childhood environment, the ongoing low-level monitoring, the readiness to respond, the alert attention to what might need managing is a feature rather than a defect in the context where it developed. In the adult context the millennial individual now inhabits, it is also often functional. They are good in a crisis. They are reliable under pressure. They see things coming before others do. These capabilities are real and they are not free. They are the adult expression of a nervous system that learned to stay on. The cost is the beach. The cost is the Sunday afternoon with nothing scheduled that produces, instead of rest, a specific restless discomfort that drives the millennial individual toward a task, any task, because tasks are what the system was built to navigate and the absence of tasks is the one situation it was not built for. There is a specific way this pattern interacts with the millennial individual's professional life, and it is worth examining because the professional rewards have reinforced the original training in ways that make it very difficult to identify the cost. The millennial individual who cannot rest is, in many professional contexts, the most valued person in the room. They are the one who checks email at 10 p.m., the one who catches the error before it becomes a problem, the one who finishes the thing even when the thing did not technically need finishing today. The work environment, particularly the culture that emerged in the post-2008 economy of doing more with less, specifically rewards the person who cannot switch off. It produces performance reviews that describe them as reliable, dedicated, committed. It produces the slow career advancement that confirms the system is working and that the staying on is producing results. What it does not produce is feedback that the staying on has a cost. The performance review does not note the accumulated activation. The promotion does not come with a reminder that the nervous system that produced the promotion is also the nervous system that cannot sit on a beach. The professional reward system is measuring output and finding the output good. It is not measuring the sustainability of the process that generates the output, and it has no mechanism for doing so. The millennial individual therefore arrives in their 30s with a career that reflects their capability and a nervous system that has been in a state of sustained activation for approximately 2 decades and has never been explicitly told it is allowed to stop. There is a name for the physiological dimension of this experience. The autonomic nervous system has 2 primary modes of operation. The sympathetic mode, fight or flight, is associated with activation, alertness, and readiness to respond. The parasympathetic mode, rest and digest, is associated with recovery, restoration, and the bodily processes that sustain health over time. In a well-regulated nervous system, they shift in response to the actual demands of the environment. In a nervous system trained during childhood to maintain activation regardless of the external demand level, because the environment was unpredictable enough that the cost of dropping the alert posture was too high, the shift to the parasympathetic mode becomes difficult. The system learned to distrust the quiet. Quiet in the original environment was not always a signal that the demand had passed. It was sometimes a signal that the demand was coming. The childhood nervous system that survived by staying alert has delivered a millennial individual who cannot quite trust the beach to be safe enough to rest on. This is not a rational assessment of the beach's threat level. The beach is fine. The nervous system knows the beach is fine. It continues to run the monitoring anyway because the monitoring became independent of the rational assessment a long time ago. In a context where that independence was the adaptive move, the recovery from this pattern is not achieved through more productivity, better planning, or the identification of the correct relaxation technique. These approaches engage the system rather than allowing it to disengage. They give the nervous system a task. Now we are optimizing rest, and the nervous system, which is very good at tasks, applies itself to the task of relaxing with the same driven efficiency it applies to everything else, producing a version of rest that is very thoroughly managed and not very restful. The recovery is slower and less structured than the millennial individual's instincts will prefer. It involves the gradual introduction of genuinely unstructured time, not scheduled recovery, not optimized downtime, but periods where there is nothing to accomplish and nothing is being measured. And the nervous system is simply present with the absence of demand. These periods will initially produce discomfort. The discomfort is not evidence that rest is not happening. It is evidence that the transition toward rest is happening, and that the transition involves the nervous system moving through its resistance rather than being forced into compliance. The beach does not get easier through willpower. It gets easier through repetition. The nervous system that has stayed on for 20 years does not receive a single sufficient signal to turn off. It receives gradually across many encounters with genuine unstructured time, an accumulation of evidence that quiet is survivable, that the demands do not return with increased force because the monitoring was briefly suspended, and it adjusts incrementally towards something that functions more like regulation. There's also a specific relationship between the grew-up-2-fast millennial individual and the concept of play that is worth naming, because it surfaces in ways that are sometimes surprising. Play, genuine, unstructured, purposeless play, not the adult version of play that involves achievement or social coordination or exercise metrics, is one of the primary mechanisms through which the nervous system learns to tolerate unstructured time. Children who play freely are developing, among other things, the capacity to be in an experience without it needing to produce a result. They are learning that presence itself has value. They are building the neural pathways that make rest possible by making purposeless absorption possible. The millennial individual who grew up too fast had less of this than their nervous system needed. The household where the adults were stretched often did not have room for the kind of unstructured child play that requires space, time, and adult indifference to outcome. Play got replaced, gradually or quickly depending on the household, with usefulness, with being helpful, with doing the thing rather than simply being present in the not doing of a thing. And the neural pathways that unstructured play builds simply did not get built or were built incompletely, because the conditions that would have built them were not consistently available. The adult version of this gap is not an inability to enjoy things. The millennial individual can enjoy things. They can engage with activities they find meaningful and experiences they find pleasurable. What they struggle with is enjoyment that has no shape, the hour with genuinely nothing required of it, the afternoon that is simply an afternoon, the vacation day that is allowed to be what it is without being optimized toward any outcome, including the outcome of feeling rested. The formless, the purposeless, the simply being. These are the specific versions of rest that the grew up to fast. Nervous system resists most consistently, because these are the versions for which the childhood training provided the least. Preparation. The millennial individual on the beach is not broken. They are not failing at vacation. They are someone whose nervous system was correctly calibrated to the environment of their childhood and has not yet received enough evidence that the current environment is different. The beach is different. The demands are different. The situation does not currently require the monitoring. The monitoring continues anyway because the monitoring was never connected to the situation. It was connected to the age at which the system learned how things worked. That age is long past. The system updates slowly, but it updates. The phone is in the bag. That is something. The bag is 2 feet away. That is also something. The water is the right color. Eventually, for a few minutes, that might be enough. Not today, perhaps. But the system is gathering evidence. The evidence accumulates. One day on a beach very much like this one, the millennial individual will realize, partway through an ordinary afternoon, that the monitoring is paused, that the quiet has been quiet for longer than they noticed, and that nothing has gone wrong in the interim. That moment will not announce itself. It will not feel like an achievement. It will feel briefly and completely like rest. Thanks for watching. If this felt familiar, leave a comment. And the next time you find yourself reaching for something to do in a moment that does not require doing anything, pause for a few seconds before you reach. That pause is the practice. The practice is the point.